Have you ever heard of Cedar Point, Kansas? It's this small town in the east central part of the state, and it's right in the heart of the Flint Hills, where you can find the densest intact tallgrass prairie in North America. Despite this incredibly gorgeous scenery, though, Cedar Point today is a semi-ghost town. The 2020 census counted a mere 22 people who still lived there. All over the place, you see remnants of people, but not actual people. Cracked sidewalks, long abandoned buildings. But behind some of these deserted places are some pretty good stories. Like just outside of town, there used to be this old, isolated farmhouse, abandoned since the 1960s or so. And it had a bit of a reputation.
There'd been rumors for years that, the family who'd lived there had booby-trapped the house.
This is my friend and colleague, arts reporter Julie Denesha. She first heard about this house secondhand from a friend of a friend, Ron Dolacek.
Well, the roof was compromised. The structure was on the verge of falling in.
So people were intrigued, but they were also kind of nervous about it.
No one really seemed to know much about the former owner. They had mostly kept to themselves. The consensus was basically, you should probably stay clear. And yet, in the late 1990s, a group of folks decide they're just going to do it anyway. They're going to break in.
Him and his friends were kind of kicking around, up to no good.
The house had been empty for a long time. They were curious, probably thrill seekers.
And he says, saw this abandoned house, decided to go in and explore.
These guys went up to the attic.
They went upstairs.
And they opened up these steamer trunks.
And inside these steamer trunks was all kinds of old tattoo memorabilia.
There were hand tattoo tools, there were pigments.
They had needles, and they had inks.
Flash, banners.
Some of this flash, these pre-drawn tattoo designs, dated back to a century ago.
And so this fellow realizes that he's found something significant.
The house was owned by Maud Wagner. She's generally known as the first female commercial tattoo artist in the United States.
Do we know how much all that stuff is worth?
Oh, thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars.
This is The People's History of Kansas City. I'm Mackenzie Martin. And on this episode, the marvelous Maud Wagner.
They would set up in little towns across America, and they would exhibit themselves.
Decades before women had the right to vote or much in the way of career options, Maud Wagner made a name for herself doing exactly what she wanted to do, as an entertainer. First, a Kansas circus performer, then as a tattoo artist.
You can imagine a woman that is tattooed from her neck down at the turn of the century in middle America would be something.
It's probably the most viewed photograph of a tattooed woman.
And I think it's important to understand her as a very independently minded woman.
She had to be a strong woman. She had to be somebody that you wouldn't trifle with.
It's really important to understanding not just their story, but like the larger story of tattooing in America.
Something I didn't mention earlier is that Ron Dolacek is a tattoo artist. And it was in a tattoo studio in Wichita, Kansas, where Ron first came face-to-face with one of these bandits.
It was 1999, and a guy walks into my tattoo shop.
And he wanted to trade this old antique business card for a tattoo.
The business card had this gorgeous photo of Maud Wagner on it, covered in these intricate and time-consuming stick-and-poke tattoos, which is when you use a needle and ink rather than an electric tattoo gun.
That was often the way tattoo artists would advertise themselves. They would have a picture of themselves with tattoos, or they would have a picture of someone they tattooed.
Even if the name Maud Wagner doesn't ring a bell, it's entirely possible you've seen this photo of her. It's from 1907, and it's super famous.
She's got this Gibson girl hair, this rose kind of tucked into her hair.
She's wearing this strapless dress. Her arms are crossed, and her brows are almost furrowed into a pout.
And she has like this 5-strand pearl necklace. It's like a choker.
And every part of her skin under that pearl choker is covered with a tattoo.
Honestly, I think that's part of the reason why there are so many stories about her. It is the most widely downloaded tattoo-related image in the Library of Congress.
First thing I did was grab magnification and make sure it was real.
Ron was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So he gave him a tattoo, which, is actually kind of a bargain because a similar card was sold at auction for over $1,000.
Wow.
And then I said, where did you get this?
And the guy said, well, we found it in this old abandoned house. And by the time they get to the house, it had been years since these guys had broken into the house, and the house had already been demolished.
And I said, you didn't keep anything else? He says, no, I got rid of everything. 8 years later, he walks back into my shop with something rolled up under his arm, and he says, I think you're going to want to see this.
And he rolls out this banner on the floor, and it's this full-body picture, hand-painted picture of a tattooed lady.
Ron immediately recognized it as Maud.
And she's kind of looking back at you, and you can see there are all of these extraordinary tattoos. There's a woman riding a lion surrounded by 2 palm trees.
Wow, yeah, she's got cobwebs on her feet. It looks like, they're very colorful. It looks like she's got maybe a mermaid, a bird.
And in a nice Kansas twist, she has sunflowers on each elbow.
I've never noticed the sunflowers before.
I'm instantly doing the math in my head, like, who can I call? Where can I borrow money? What do I got to do to get this? Because this is not leaving my shop.
Finding out about Maud, finding out she was from Emporia, Kansas, kickstarted this obsession, with her story, and he wanted to learn everything about her. This was a piece of history that not a lot of people were interested in for a long, long time. And so a lot of it was just thrown away.
But then suddenly that all changed. Yeah. Okay, so for reference here, there are 2 main collections out there about Maud Wagner. There's the stuff that was recovered from her house a handful of decades ago, which Ron has several pieces from. It's easy to tell because some of that stuff has water damage or little marks from being chewed on by mice for years and years. But then there's also this whole other collection. And this one was pristinely maintained by Maud's family.
There were a lot of people who were interested in purchasing the collection because by the 1990s, people were really getting interested in tattoo ephemera.
It was a bit of a bidding war. The person who ended up purchasing it from a Wagner family heir was author and filmmaker Alan Governor.
He understood that my interest wasn't as an antique dealer, that I wanted to see this collection preserved.
Based on this collection that he had saved, Alan Governor wrote 3 books about the Wagner family.
On top of that, the bulk of the collection now lives at the South Street Seaport Museum in New York City, which preserves the history of maritime travel. It's fitting since it was actually American sailors returning from travels abroad that helped popularize tattoos in the United States.
I talked about this with Darren Bray.
The stuff that survives for the Wagners, there's nothing else like it.
Darren Bray is an art and antique dealer based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He's an expert in folk art and especially tattoo history.
It is the largest body of early tattoo material to survive and stay intact. And if someone were to bring together all the artifacts, it would just blow people away. The business cards in that photo album are some of the only examples for really early tattoo artists that survive. The business cards are like baseball cards to collectors.
Whew. Wow. Okay, so at this point I am locked in. I'm ready to hear who exactly was Maud Wagner.
Well, Maud wasn't always Maud. She was actually born Nora Stevens on February 12th in 1877. Her mom was a farm wife, and her dad was a Civil War veteran and a homesteader.
What do we know about Emporia, Kansas, where she kind of grew up?
Emporia was a cultural and educational and intellectual hub in the Midwest, and they actually called it, at that time, the Athens of the Prairie. There were 2 colleges, there was an opera house. Another thing interesting about Emporia was that it was the crossroad of 2 major railroads.
Because we had these 2 railroads, it brought all sorts of different people.
I talked about this with Lisa Soller. She works at the Lyon County History Center and Museum.
There's several newspaper articles about mediums and fortune tellers that stopped here.
And Soller thought, that was probably where young Nora was introduced to the excitement of circus life, probably from one of the traveling shows that often swept through Emporia.
I feel like running off to the circus is sort of a cliche that someone does when they want to leave their small town life behind in search of a real adventure. Do you think that's what she was doing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Hurry, step this way, the strangest sight from the island.
I mean, we don't know a lot about her early life, but it's clear that she probably did not want to be a farm girl. I mean, the circus was sort of like Hollywood. It would be like running off to Los Angeles to become a big movie star. It would seem like a glamorous life.
You've got the dime. It's just starting. So hurry. Look 'em over, the lady without a head. There are thin ones. There are fat ones. They're all inside.
This was like a chance for people in small towns to like see a big show. Circus would roll into town. They had exotic animals. They had aerialists. They had people working with elephants.
Starting in the late 1800s, another side attraction at the circus was the tattooed lady.
Lydia, oh Lydia, say, have you met Lydia? Lydia, the tattooed lady.
There was a very famous tattooed lady who traveled with Barnum and Bailey. She was married to a man named Frank Howard, so it was Frank and Annie Howard.
The women would sometimes enter the ring fully covered and then take off a robe to reveal this elaborate costume and a full bodysuit of ink. And their fame allowed them to become more financially independent, a rarity in the Victorian era. So how old was Maud when she joined the circus?
Nora was in her early 20s when she changed her name to Maud, and she hit the road with her sister Dora. They joined a traveling show where they performed as contortionists, and they also had a high wire act.
75 feet above the ground, death-defying acts become family affairs.
They were known as the Stevens sisters.
She was an aerialist and a contortionist. That takes a certain personality to do those things, especially as a woman. She skirted convention.
So how soon in her circus career does she meet one Gus Wagner?
So as the story goes, they met at the World's Fair in 1904.
Meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair.
The World's Fair came to St. Louis in 1904, and it was a crazy 7-month extravaganza that drew almost 20 million people from around the world to Missouri's famous Forest Park. There were exhibits from over 60 countries, showing off new technology like outdoor electric lighting, a wireless telephone, and the automobile.
They also had a horse made of pecans, and not one, but 2 butter sculptures of Theodore Roosevelt.
Meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair.
Back then, you went to the World's Fair to see the world. And one of the millions of people there was Gus Wagner.
Gus was one of the most significant tattooers at the turn of the century.
That's Kansas tattoo artist again, Ron Dolachek.
Born in 1872, joins Merchant Marines, and in sailing, they stopped in the South Pacific in Borneo and Indonesia for a significant amount of time. He befriends local tribesmen, and they start tattooing him, and a majority of his tattooing was done that way. And that's why he learned to tattoo by hand. So when he comes back to the United States, he's exhibiting himself as the world's most artistically marked up man and globetrotting tattooer Gus Wagner.
He told this reporter that he carried a pictorial history of his life on his body. He said he had the history of his life on his breast, a history of America on his back, and the romance of the sea on each arm.
So he was like a world traveler, suave, charismatic, maybe good looking.
I think he was good looking. I mean, you know, in a 19th century kind of way.
So how do we think that they met in this story? Like their eyes met across the fairgrounds?
That's the way the story goes. It was a romantic place to be.
Maud meets Gus, pretty much approaches him, says, I'd like to be a tattooed woman. And Gus says, I'm looking for a wife.
And she said, I'll go on a date with you, but only if you teach me how to tattoo.
So at this point, when she sees Gus Wagner kind of across the fairgrounds, does she have any experience with tattoos?
No, at that point she had 0 tattoos. And he was almost entirely tattooed from his neck to his toes.
And so they traded a lesson in tattooing for a first date and pretty much hit it off right away.
That's such a good meet cute.
Well, I'm sad to say it's not a true story.
What?
That little part of the narrative is untrue.
Gus, he often exaggerated. I mean, how do you get someone in the door? You have to tell a good story.
There's so few records of those types of things from that era that it's, we kind of have to speculate on some things. There's some things that we're never going to know, but that keeps it interesting.
It's complicated because some of the information is untrue, but that also might be the reason why people are drawn in or paying attention to it. That might be the hook that gets them to see all the other parts of it.
This is a really interesting point, and actually one I think about a lot. So I will ask you, behind the myth of their first date, what do we actually think to be true about their relationship, which turned into a marriage, but was also a business partnership, really?
So there's this amazing 1903 photo of Gus tattooing Maud in Indiana, and it was probably shortly after they met. It's a black and white photo, but he's hand-colored it. And you have Maud, and she's hiked up her skirts. She really doesn't have a lot of tattoos yet. And he's giving her this tattoo of this tiger on her thigh. And it's just this real intimate moment. And it's the beginning of their relationship together. And that was kind of a part of their shtick when they first started. He would tattoo her in public. And he was always making a point to make sure her talents were highlighted. He actually told this reporter from the St. Louis Dispatch, "My wife's a tattoo artist too. She's an actress and she's a contortionist. And I've got her back and arms covered with the prettiest tattoo work you ever looked at." I think that's cute. They really seem like they were in love.
Yeah. It seems like a more contemporary marriage in a lot of ways, in that they were maybe a little bit more equal and that they supported each other and their art. How long does it take for her to become covered in the way that we know her as today?
I think it was about 4 years. She was really unusual for the time. And that's part of the reason why she was able to get people to pay to look at her.
A woman walks down the street now heavily tattooed, nobody bats an eye. But in 1920, I bet you it was a different deal.
She should be celebrated as a pioneer in that she had the boldness to do this to her body, to make her body into a living piece of sculpture.
You mentioned that there were these other kind of earlier tattooed ladies like Annie Howard that would be these big spectacles in the carnival scene. But I think kind of what interests me about Maud is that she wasn't only tattooed like these other women, but she was also tattooing. That's kind of the unique part of her story.
Yeah, no, she was very much a partner. And she definitely knew how to tattoo. There's one piece of tattoo flash that she created for sure, and she signed it. And it's this kind of fanciful woman with butterfly wings.
So can we officially claim that she was the first commercial tattoo artist?
I think we can, but not everyone I spoke to thinks that way.
I question the claim that she was the first female tattoo artist. I really question that.
Okay, so we sort of left off right as Maud and Gus were becoming inseparable, not just as husband and wife, but really as business partners. I'm curious what it was like for them traveling all over America, setting up shop in different places as they pleased.
So Gus built this rolling museum of relics from all corners of the globe. And he used his taxidermy skills to create specimens that would draw a big crowd. And he had things like a baby mermaid and a human-headed octopus. He had this model of a human using paper mache and real human bones. And he put real human hair on it, and they called it Grandpa Snazzy.
Oh, my God.
And they dragged it around to all these different carnivals until Grandpa Snazzy started apparently looking a little bit worse for the wear, so they buried it somewhere on the road. He also collected reptiles for his traveling shows, and at one point, Maud had a pet Gila monster that she was really fond of, which people were, when they found out about it, were very disturbed because they're kind of dangerous. And she used to defang copperheads. And for a while, they had, I think it was a boa constrictor, and it had to be kept warm. And so they would keep it in bed with them until finally it did eventually. I mean, it wasn't warm enough, so it died. And so So Gus skinned it and they made a big stew and they ate it.
These are insane.
Well,
Truly.
it's life on the road.
They traveled a lot, and as a couple, they're credited at the turn of the century with bringing tattooing into Middle America when you would only find it in places like San Francisco, the ports of Virginia, things like that.
But then, at some point, it is not just them anymore because they have a kid.
Yeah. In 1910, the Wagner's daughter and only child, Lativa, was born.
I heard that she was kind of immediately thrust into the world of tattooing.
Her dad taught her how to tattoo. I think she was 7 or 8 when he gave her a magazine and he gave her one of his tattoo tools. And he trained her how to create a design by tattooing a magazine. And then she started tattooing people.
Wait,
she was
what?
very young.
I didn't know it was that young.
Oh, well, she went on to become kind of an important tattoo artist in her own right.
But I have read that there's one very somewhat potentially shocking part of Lativa's life in that she doesn't have any tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of the most notable completely tattooed couples in American history had a daughter with 0 tattoos.
Maud forbade Lativa from ever acquiring a tattoo.
I think that seems surprising to me for so many reasons. And one is that if I was shopping around for a tattoo artist, it would seem to be a red flag in these contemporary times for a tattoo artist to not have any tattoos. But also, I'm thinking about her parents, and why would they not want her to be tattooed? They love tattoos.
I don't know. I think it was definitely Maud. Maud told her that she didn't want her to get a tattoo. But she relented. She relented when Gus died.
How did Gus die?
He was struck by lightning.
Oof.
Which is crazy. She told Lativa that she could get a tattoo then. But Lativa said, if she was going to get a tattoo, it would have been from her dad. So it was kind of sad.
You know, we haven't really talked yet about the stigma of tattoos back then, but that is something that comes up a lot in the first half of the 1900s. I know I was watching this CBC documentary from 1964 about this Canadian tattoo artist. His name was Doc Forbes Hendry. And there's this part where he's tattooing a woman, but beforehand, he measures her dresses so that he knows for sure that all of the tattoos he's placing are places that she can easily cover up.
Some people really like this work, and then there's others that have a prejudice against different types of hobbies and designs, and such as this being tattooed on the skin. So for that reason, we have kept it more or less a private affair.
Do we know if that was ever an issue for Maud?
They talk a little bit about that. Apparently, Gus and Maud wanted to go to church occasionally, and often they were told they weren't welcome. And one time, a preacher even lost his job for letting show people in.
I guess that is one strong possibility then for why maybe Maud didn't want Lativa to get tattooed, so that it would be easier for her to blend into polite society, and then Lativa wouldn't have to be identified as part of the carnival if she didn't want to be.
I think if anybody understood the stigma that would be associated with having tattoos, it would have been Maud.
So I know that Lativa and Maud continued to tattoo and travel around together after Gus's death, but it still must have been hard for the two of them to lose Gus, especially in such a tragic way.
Yeah, well, Gus was kind of the reason why they did what they did. In a lot of ways, Maud was in the background, and he was the front man. And so it was really rare when a reporter from the Tulsa World caught Maud and her daughter Lativa as they were packing up to leave, and they described it as getting back under the canvas. Like they were excited to get back to life underneath the circus tent.
Oh, that is really sweet. So it seems like the two of them really liked traveling around, and that was just like a life that they chose.
Yeah. And Maud said, Tulsa isn't much of a town for tattooing either. Most of our demand in this part of the country is for cowboy and Indian designs. But in the East, the figure of a woman is still popular for tattooing. But the Westerner seems to think his horse makes a prettier picture.
So clearly she's judging the people of Tulsa for not wanting women tattoos.
I guess. And then she said, most people who want tattoos are transients, which I think she's talking about, people on the road like herself. Some of them want tattoos for identification. Others want mementos of something they like or a place they've been. And I thought it was so cool that this was her voice. And I kind of felt like I was kind of searching for her voice. And when I found this, even though it's just like a little snatch of something, it was kind of cool to hear that she could talk to the reporters too.
I get a good sense of her, too, just from kind of looking at the photos in the collection, especially the ones where she's just kind of hanging out with Lativa.
I love this photo on the back of the Lativa book. Have you seen this?
That is the voice of Alan Governor, again there, who bought and helped preserve the Wagner collection.
She's a proud mother with a happy little girl. There's an aspect of it that while her body in a way is exotic because of the tattoos, there's also, you look at those pictures and the snapshots that are in the scrapbook that Gus kept, and she enjoyed having a family. There's a sense of the normalcy of life.
Now I kind of want to get back to this idea that we touched on earlier, because Alan Governor is the one who cast some serious doubt on Maud's claims to fame, and really how much of a tattoo artist she really was.
Quite frankly, I've never found much evidence. I've never seen a tattoo that was credited to Maud. And in the collection that we have, and maybe someone else has something else, there's only one flash sheet that was made by Maud that's signed with her name.
It's true. We don't know exactly how many tattoos that Maud designed, but Gus didn't sign his flash either. Darren Bray says, why would she design tattoo flash?
The fact that she didn't paint any tattoo flash, as far as we know, why would she? Gus already had books and books of it. I mean, she married an established tattoo artist and tattooed man, so he was the point person on everything. But she definitely was a tattoo artist. Her daughter comments on it and remarks on it. She was not just an accessory or like a prop.
I will also point out that as someone who has done a lot of history deep dives, as historians are always saying, history is kind of told through the lens of the winners, and women don't really have a lot of power in the early 1900s. And like you have said, it's usually him that's talking to reporters, so it's a little bit easier for the front man to just be inflated a little bit. And so if we think about that, it would make sense why maybe her stuff isn't super well documented, but it doesn't mean that she wasn't an incredible tattoo artist and really punching through and spearheading a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. But I do think that Gus was always trying to call attention to her and trying to make sure that, all of their cards said that she was a tattoo artist. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah, that's true. You'd think that by the business cards alone that she would have enough credit.
There's some people who are you have to have all this evidence. And so I kind of get that in a way. Being a reporter, I'm always afraid to say something wrong. And there's so many things that are not true, sort of about them as a couple. So, I can kind of see how someone might want to, reel it back a little bit. But, I just think it's so cool. When I saw her picture and I found out she was a Kansas girl, I was just how did I not know about this before? She's a very different person from history. And I feel so often, we heard about the people who followed the rules. And she was really she forged her own path. I felt like she was in charge and she had this idea of what she wanted to do and she just went out and did it.
100%.
And I think that's part of our story also.
Me too. Why do you think Dolacek was so touched by the Maud story?
I think he thought of both Gus and Maud as kindred spirits.
Well, being a tattooer, obviously I'm tied to it. I've always had an interest in Kansas history, and Kansas has a reputation for being somewhat flat and boring. And I really enjoy the fact that such a spectacular story came from such a boring place, so to speak.
I love that. And as I understand it, he was so moved by the story that he was spurred into action.
Yeah, he sort of got in his head that he had to find their graves. And when he visited this lonely little cemetery in the Flint Hills. He walked around and he walked around and he couldn't find their graves.
I find the cemetery, but the first headstone was Maud's parents, but no Gus or Maud. So I leave a note in the guest registry. 6-8 months goes by. Turns out a giant peony bush had grown up over what was nothing more than 2 concrete blocks. Maud's concrete block just said MW and Gus was left blank. So I said, what do I have to do to get them headstones?
I mean, lots of people would just say, they don't have headstones, but it's cool that I know where they're buried. But he decided that they had to have new headstones that talked about them in a way that honored their career.
So I had designs drawn up, had the headstones made, and we went and placed the headstones adjacent to the existing markers so that they were recognized like everybody else in the cemetery,
Now the 2 stones read, the original Gus Wagner, globe-trotting tattooer, and Maud Stevens Wagner, America's First Lady tattooer.
I guess now that it's written in stone, we have to take it as fact that she was the first female tattoo artist in the United States.
I'd say.
You can see photos of Maud and Gus Wagner and read Julie's story all about them at kcur.org/peopleshistory. This episode of A People's History of Kansas City was reported by Julie Denesha and produced by me, Mackenzie Martin, with Seth Jarouse. Mixed also by me. Editing by Suzanne Hogan and Luke Martin. You heard audio from the Marx Brothers, Meet Me in St. Louis, CBC Television, and Blue Dot Sessions. And huge thanks this episode to Alan Governor. His books were an incredible resource for Julie while reporting this story. We are a production of KCUR Studios, a podcast network in Kansas City, and we'll be back next month with another episode about the underdogs and renegades who continue to make Kansas City and the region what it is. Until then, thank you so much for listening.